Hello, today I'm going to be reading chapter 30 of Takeout by Margaret Maron. With an arrest made and mellowed by the wine she'd drunk, Sigrid was looking forward to a quiet evening with that new book of poetry she'd picked up at Book Expo on Saturday. Upon unlocking her front door, though, she walked into a noisy, smoke-filled hall. Roman Termega stood on a step stool to silence the smoke alarm on the ceiling. "What happened?" she asked, leaving the door open to help the smoke dissipate. "I always do this," her housemate fumed. "I mean to leave the kitchen just for a minute, and the next thing I know— I'm so sorry, my dear. It was going to be Cornish game hens and trout with asparagus puree tonight. Now I'm afraid it'll have to be takeout. Would you like Italian, Mexican, or Chinese?" Before she could answer, the phone rang, and it was Marcus Livingston, who invited her to join him for dinner. "Vincent Haas is flying back to Austria day after tomorrow, and I thought a bon voyage party might not be amiss. At Madigan's. Let him taste the best steak in the city before he leaves." "Does this mean he's not Newman's son?" "It does." For a moment, Sigurd couldn't decide if she was pleased or sorry. "You said party. Who else is coming?" "Just Elliot Buntrock and Rudy Gottfried." "May I bring a friend with me?" "Elliot knows him." "By all means." On the walk over to the restaurant, which was just a few blocks south of them on the river, Sigurd told Roman about Vincent Haas and his claim to be Newman's son. "My dear Sigurd, no wonder you've seemed so distracted. How very distressing for you this must have been," Roman said. "Will tonight be a wake?" "What do you mean?" "That poor man must have thought he'd be going home a millionaire, and now, not only is he not Oscar's son, he may never learn who his real father is." Madigan's was a turn-of-the-century tavern and chop-house with absolutely no pretensions of trendiness. Back in the days of sailing ships, laboring dock workers had eaten and drunk here, and its clientele was still more blue-collar than white. Dirty sawdust soaked up any spilled beverages, and the air was thick with the smells of beer, cigarettes, and grilled meat. The high-backed wooden booths were slightly sticky, but more than roomy enough to hold 6 people. How it could pass a sanitary inspection was anyone's guess, but when she mentioned this to Marcus once, he had laughed and said, "If they ever get cited, I'll defend them pro bono." Like Marcus, Sigurd had been introduced to this old relic of New York by Oscar Newman. Indeed, this was where they'd first eaten. In their short time together, he had taken her everywhere, from 4-star restaurants in Midtown to dim-sum places in Chinatown and a gyro stand in Times Square. But he'd had a special fondness for this scruffy old restaurant, and it did serve the best steaks she had ever tasted. She had avoided it since his death, but it somehow felt right to come here tonight to say goodbye to the man who wasn't his son but could have been. Roman, of course, was enchanted. He stepped inside, took a deep breath, and immediately exclaimed in his deep bass voice, "What atmosphere! What ambience! I had no idea such a place still existed." Women could no longer be legally excluded, but neither were they encouraged, so Sigurd was the only female there that night. She and Roman were the last to arrive, and the other 4 slid over to make room for them. She introduced Roman and gave Vincent Haas a look of sympathy. "Are you very disappointed about the DNA results?" "A little," he admitted. "Once I met you, I knew you would do what was fair if things turned out that way. But I meant it when I said I wasn't just about money. I really did think my birth certificate was true. Now I'll never know who my biological father is. Leela certainly can't tell me." He gave a fatalistic shrug. "Oh well, A waiter arrived with thick glass mugs of beer and a basket of rolls. His apron was stained, but the rolls were warm and crusty. They were ready to order by the time he brought beers for Sigrid and Roman. She opted for char-grilled lamb chops, while the others wanted varying cuts of steak with baked potatoes. As the meal progressed, talk turned to other subjects. The things Haas had seen and done on this trip, suggestions for how to spend his final day, the souvenirs he had bought for his daughters, and the long flight back to Austria that was facing him. It was almost 9 as the meal drew to a close, but Marcus Livingston seemed in no hurry to leave. He signaled the waiter for another round of drinks. "None for me," said Vincent Haas. "I thought I was over my jet lag, but for some reason I'm really tired." "I'll help you get a cab," Rudy Gottfried said. "Don't let them take my beer. I'll be back." Haas stood and they exchanged the usual parting pleasantries of people who did not know each other well and did not expect to meet again. "I really do appreciate your kindness," he told Sigrid. "He seems like a decent man," she said, watching him leave with Gottfried. "Did he want to challenge the test?" "No," said her lawyer. "Where did you get a sample of Newman's DNA? I thought Mrs. Bales had cleared everything from the Connecticut house." "She did. He speared a final morsel of steak with his fork. Did you do know that Oscar willed his body to science?" Sigrid nodded. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Science gave a little bit of it back. Rudy Gottfried rejoined them a few minutes later and downed his beer in one long swallow. "Another?" asked Livingston, who was eyeing him closely. "Yeah, what the hell?" Roman exchanged a look of curiosity with Sigrid. "Is something going on here?" asked Buntrock, who had also picked up on the sudden tension. Livingston said nothing, just signaled the waiter with Gottfried's empty glass. "I didn't tell him," Rudy said. "Tell him what?" Sigrid asked, while Roman sat silently for once and did not chime in with a dozen questions. "I gave the lab a sample of my DNA too. It matched." "You and Leela Nagy?" Sigrid was stunned. He gave her a shamefaced nod. "You're going to think I betrayed Oscar, but it wasn't like that. He and Leela had a huge fight. They both said it was over. Oscar meant it. She didn't. He was gone for 3 days. When he came back to the loft, she tried every trick in her bag to get him back in her bed again, but none of them worked. Took her another month to face the facts and move out. I'm not proud of what happened. It was just rebound sex, though. She thought it would hurt him, but he really wouldn't given a damn at that point. It never occurred to either of us that she was pregnant when she left New York. Maybe she really believed Oscar was the father, or maybe it was wishful thinking. Who knows?" The waiter set a fresh beer in front of him, and he drank half of it, then pushed the rest aside. "Will you see Haas again?" Sigrid asked. Rudy shook his head. "It's a little late to be his daddy." "Not too late to be a grandfather to his daughters," said Buntrock. "No, the past is past." His voice trailed off into silence. "He gave me his card, but I won't write. It really is too late." "Keep the card," Livingston advised him. "You never know." Only the brightest stars make it through Manhattan's light pollution, but the moon was nearly full, and it shone brightly in the western sky as Sigrid and Roman walked home through nearly deserted streets. Do you ever wish you had children?" Roman asked. Sigrid shook her head. "I like to work too much. Besides, I can't see myself as a single mother. You're still young. You might find someone new." "Trying to get rid of me, Roman?" "No!" He stopped and looked down at her earnestly. "Never that. Remember how we first met, when you thought I was a thief who had broken into Anne's apartment?" She smiled and started to walk on, but he stayed where he was. "Then we found to Auntie Ophelia's house and you agreed to rent it with me? Yes. I don't wish to sound maudlin, my dear, but these last years have been the happiest of my entire life. I would never have written a book without you. It hasn't been a one-way street, Roman. Really? Really, she said, and impulsively tucked her arm in his as they walked on. She would always miss Newman, but that cold lump of grief she had carried around for so long was almost completely melted. Without Roman to nag and prod, to ask endless questions about police procedure, to bombard her with quirky facts about science and nature, not to mention his forays into culinary wonders, she might still be in bed with the covers over her head. They turned west at Christopher Street, and the moon met them on full, casting long shadows behind them and lighting their way ahead. And that is the end of chapter 30, and that is also the end of the book. So this is the end of Takeout by Margaret Maron, and if you guys have any suggestions for books I should read next, I'm open to suggestions, and I hope to keep reading, and as always, have a wonderful rest of your day.